Hey everyone, Howard Gearhauser here again alongside my dad, Dr. G. In today's video episode, we wanted to talk about stress, but more specifically, how stress is related to our subconscious programming and how it's related to the conditioning of, what our parents have taught us and what their parents taught them, kind of being passed down through generations, as well as the societal conditioning, us falling into this programming that keeps us in these feelings of fear, lack, and comparison, and judgment, and shame, and guilt. Why 99% of us seem to be living by these emotions. And this obviously creates a lot of stress and anxiety. And so one theme that we've been playing around with, and we've seen this before, so obviously we didn't come up with this, but that this conditioning and this subconscious programming is very similar to the matrix. And to separate yourself from it's kind of like being unplugged. So that's an analogy we'll be using more and more. So if you hear us referencing the matrix, we're really referencing this conditioning and this subconscious programming that comes from our society that keeps us in fear and in lack and in comparison and in shame and all of these emotions that if we don't gain awareness to realizing that these emotions are not us, we're going to be another lemming off the cliff, so to speak. So we want to talk about how stress is related to these emotions and then what you can do to separate yourself from it. So Dad, can you take it away from here?
Yes, well, stress and these emotions, let's say the emotion of fear, if you think of an animal out in nature, a deer grazing, and he's fine, he's grazing, but staying alert because that's what's necessary to survive. But then he smells or catches a glimpse of a tiger, fairly close by, stalking him. So he's going to go into a very, very high fight or flight mode where he is going to run or fight the tiger or maybe try to hide from the tiger. But his senses are all going to go on to his physical environment because his physical environment is the top priority when there's a tiger that is stalking you nearby. So you're not going to survive if you don't do something, very dramatic. And so the deer goes on to this high alert because of the fear. Well, our modern society and even not so modern society, but fear is a big component, and there's all those other emotions that Howard just talked about. But all of these things drive us into that fight or flight mode, which shuts off the parasympathetic nervous system. So fight or flight is do or die, and we don't care what it costs because otherwise we're tiger food. And that's okay for the deer because the deer runs and either the tiger eats him or he gets away. And if he gets away, within 10 minutes, he's back to grazing. He's back into his parasympathetic nervous system, which is more appropriate, for keeping him healthy and keeping him alive because it includes the repair processes. It includes releasing all the hormones for proper functioning and taking care of the waste products and the reactive oxygen species and all these things that build up. They're then taken care of when we're in balance between the parasympathetic and the fight or flight or sympathetic nervous system. So for the deer, they're out of it until the next tiger comes along, which might be tomorrow, or might be next week, or it might be next month. But for the human who is afraid of some thing that's in the future or ruminating on some fearful thing in the past and reliving it, a lot of us are in this fight or flight mode all the time, and that's chronic stress, and that leads to anxiety and depression, and it leads to all kinds of physical diseases. So science has found this more and more, that physical diseases come about when we're constantly on this fight or flight mode where the body doesn't care if it survives till tomorrow because it needs to survive the next 10 minutes. but it's in that 24/7, 365, or it's in that way too much of the time. So our fear and our anxiety that we have today usually is not immediately life-threatening, but the responses are the same as the deer. And so this has been studied. Our cortisol goes up. Now, when you're in this chronic stress, day after day, month after month, the cortisol eventually a lot of times starts to fail because it's just overused. It's like, overusing your engine and flooring it constantly and never giving it a rest. It'll eventually start to sputter. And so our adrenal glands, which makes the cortisol, make the adrenaline, the noradrenaline, the stress hormones. If we never shut it off, then it begins to wear down. And in functional medicine, we call this adrenal fatigue. It's kind of a vague diagnosis. And if you go to an endocrinologist, they're going to say there's no such thing as adrenal fatigue. But we do see it. We do see that the cortisol secretion in a normal daily pattern is it's high. It comes up just before we wake up in the morning. It's one of the things that wakes us up. And then during the day, it tapers off like this. So someone who is chronically stressed might be flatlining low, or they might have a high level if the stress is early, and it might stay too high. And cortisol keeps us awake. So that's the sleep problems that we have associated with stress. And so our society and our family, as Howard mentioned, and all these different factors keep us in this state. And if you think about, what we do every day, we wake up in the morning and we go out and watch the sunrise and meditate and count our blessings. A lot of times we check our cell phone or we check our email, or the first thing we do is something that is likely to establish the stress reaction in us. Because a lot of times I look at my cell phone, and unfortunately I am a technophobe, so I don't know how to remove these, but I'll see a little sticker and it'll tell me what bad thing happened in the news that day. I didn't program that on there. So the Matrix wants us in this fight or flight mode, because the way we try to make ourselves better is externally, outside of us. We want to buy a Porsche, or we want to become a movie star, or become famous, or all these different things that society says, well, that's what you need to do. If you want to be, if you want to be a fulfilled human being, you need to be famous. You need to be on the cover of that magazine, and then you will have made it. So we have these expectations which are mostly impossible to achieve. And so that's even better for the Matrix, because we'll keep, taking the antidepressant medications, which harms your brain further. The anti-anxiety, become addicted to the anti-anxiety meds, be impossible to get off it, all these different things that keep us trapped. So the first step is just awareness that this Matrix is out there, that it's doing things that helps them stay in control, like putting that little flag up on my cell phone telling me the worst thing that happened that day and what celebrity got divorced that day or was cheating on their spouse that day. That's stuff that drags you down into competition, fear, shame, guilt, all these emotions, where we could be watching the sun comes up, you instantly get gratitude. You instantly feel good. You instantly are optimistic, because you're actually getting energy from that sun. And that sun is also bringing in information to program this 37 trillion cells that are hugely complex. And so the mind and the wireless frequencies, the natural ones that come from the sun, are all interconnected. And so we just need to be aware that the Matrix is out there, just like in the movie. None of us, most of us know. And, uh, it's just something that we want you to become aware of, that we are taking baby steps in this process ourselves. We have become aware and we're trying to find out different ways. And one of them, since I'm a physician and I'm into physics and quantum physics, one of the ways that we thought we could help humanity out is some of these ways that nature just recharges us automatically. And you don't really have to do anything other than realize I have to go sit by a tree, or I have to go down by the river. I have to do that or something like that every single day. This is, if you don't, then you could be stuck in the matrix, and we get deeper and deeper into it. And if you watch the news, you know that everything's about to blow apart. I don't want to, I believe we're at the cusp of transitioning into humans becoming aware of what they're doing and fixing it. So I'm optimistic, and I believe that being optimistic is important, that just, going out and crusading and carrying a sign and causing a riot, that makes the matrix stronger. That's what it wants. It wants you to riot and then, tamp it down.
Well, it wants,
Love that.
yeah, it wants division too among all of us. So, there's unity and there's division. We try to take the unity standpoint. And also, if you get connected with nature, you're automatically being reprogrammed in the opposite direction, to where you're feeling the feelings of love and gratitude and appreciation and compassion and unity, all of these different things. So that's what connecting with nature provides. Now, if you fall into kind of the programming that really is running our world, and just accept it, for what it is, you're going to be susceptible to feeling the emotions that they're portraying. I mean, most of the news is very negative. It's trying to make you afraid. So one thing that we like to do and that we recommend, aside from getting out in nature, is do a daily meditation, even if it's just 5 minutes. Become aware of the way you're feeling. If you close your eyes and realize, wow, I'm living in fear, or I'm absolutely living with a feeling of lack, like that there's not enough to go around. You can start putting awareness onto those feelings. You'll be able to connect the dots for why you feel that way. And I recommend, one thing that I do, and I know my dad does, we try to avoid the news like the plague. There's very little benefit from watching the news. Replace watching the news in the morning with going on a morning walk outside. Get some sun, get out in nature. You'll feel much better. Your day will go completely different if you start establishing that morning routine. We do have a video on our exact morning routine, which I recommend you watch. Start your day that way. Another thing that I did that was really helpful in breaking apart from the subconscious programming that's very negative is to start modifying who I'm following on social media. And that meant removing a lot of people that I was friends with, or even family members, if what they're posting isn't negative, or if it's bringing out a negative emotion from within me, like jealousy, for example. Sometimes it's easier to just unfollow those things and replace it with something that's going to uplift you. Start doing things like that. Really be aware of your inputs. What radio station are you tuning into? Are you tuning into Fear FM? Or are you tuning into K-Love, for example? You have the choice of what station you tune into, but if you're watching the news every day, you're choosing to live in fear, essentially. So now you have this awareness. Start practicing this awareness in your day-to-day life, and choose the station that of the emotion that you want to feel. Write down 10 things that you're grateful for. This is going to change the way you think, the way you feel, and then the way your life comes about will be much more positive and not so daunting and scary. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I just add that, my story was I was bought into this conditioning, and for medical doctors, we're conditioned that drugs are the answer. We're really trained to diagnose things and prescribe drugs. So I was indoctrinated by the medical system. I was indoctrinated that of a feeling of lack, and that everything is competition. And, if you don't beat the other guy, this was something that was so hard to get out of my psyche, this competition. Everything's competition. There's not enough to go around. We have to compete for everything. You have to be better than the person next to you. And, this is all just BS, but it is so hard to really see it when you're living it. It's so hard to see it. So that's why stepping out into nature, and I was always good at stepping out into nature, and I always felt better there. But even when I was out in nature, I was competitive. I used to climb big mountains like in the Himalayas in Alaska. And if I had climbing partners, I was never a good climbing partner, because it was always about how fast can we climb this mountain? Like, no, don't stop and take a look at the view. It's like a competition. And then when I get to the top of, some 8,000 meter peak, it's like, I was fulfilled for like a minute. And then and just because of my programming, within 5 minutes, it's like, okay, what next? It's like nothing's ever enough. So you want, this is hard. And sometimes it takes a life-changing event, like what happened to me, a near-death experience that wakes you up. But you can wake up without having the near-death experience. And that's what we're all about, is trying to get people to wake up to what's important.
Exactly. So, look at our perspective. We don't have the only perspective. We don't know everything. We're not all knowing. This is just our experience. These are some techniques that we're trying to keep ourselves alert, so we don't just fall into being another brainwashed person that this system and that this matrix is taking advantage of. The matrix doesn't want people to become enlightened. I mean, think about how much power an enlightened person like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Jesus or the Buddha, how much power they have just by being awake, fully awake, and living and embracing unconditional love. They had immense power from that position, and that's scary to this system that wants us all to be brainwashed lemmings. So take your power back. Realize that you have a choice. You don't need to be living in a constant state of stress and fear. That's actually a choice you're making, but you have to have awareness of that. You even have that choice first. So here's some tactics that you can apply, and go check out the channel too, because pretty much everything we talk about has to do with this exact concept. So go watch the YouTube videos, go check out the Facebook fan page. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
No, that's good. Be happy. Lots of love.
Exactly. We thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next video. Thanks, Dad.